Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to our online panelists, audience members for joining us as well. Welcome to day 5, the final day of China Week. It's been a fantastic week and great to see so many of you attend multiple sessions. So thank you for keeping your energy spirits high. And we've got a big celebration tonight to top off the week. Today we're here for the panel Young Voices Driving Change in recognition of the crucial role that young people are playing in motivating policymakers and decision makers to drive urgent climate action. We do have audience in person and online, so we'll have time for audience Q&A. And we'll have a microphone going around the room, and also you can put your questions in the chat box for those on Zoom. I'll now hand to our chair of this session today, Alici Politi, who's at the Lao China Institute as a PhD student and as our social media coordinator. Thank you, Alici.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you to everyone here who has joined us for this great discussion. Today, we will discuss the role of youth in the fight against climate change and in driving dialogue in foreign relations and in the climate movement. So younger generations are often at the forefront of climate debate, with having obviously the weight of current governance and policymakers' decision bearing on their shoulders. And profoundly affecting their future, which will inevitably be affected by climate change. Questions still remain in driving dialogue, action, and change globally, and specifically in the collaboration with China, which still remains an indispensable partner in the global fight against climate change. I'd like to welcome an exceptional lineup of young experts for this event. So to discuss this topic today, we have the pleasure of having here with us Dr. Giulia Sciorati, who's a postdoctoral research fellow at the University of Trenton, an associate research fellow at ISPI Asia Center for the China program. Giulia is also a member of the Italian Association of Chinese Studies, the European Association for Chinese Studies, and the American Association for Asian Studies. We also have Gordon Abeku-Mensah with us today, a global shaper at the World Economic Forum, consultant at the World Bank, and public policy researcher at Fondazione Astrid in Rome. And then joining us today is also Matthew McGeoch, transition analyst at the Climate Bonds Initiative and founder and co-president of Oxford University Silk Road think tank. He has recently concluded his experience at the UN, where he worked on an international sustainable finance project. So I will start our discussion with you, Giulia. So China is trying to emerge as a green leader on the global stage, as shown by the introduction of the concept of ecological civilization in the constitution of the CCP in 2012. A concept that was then endorsed in 2013, with Xi declaring his intentions to pursue climate change collaboration and support China's renewable energy sector and energy transformation. Then in 2016, President Xi has also announced his pledge for making the BRI greener. And he has recently announced China's commitment to stop building new coal-fired projects abroad. He also recently promised to lead the world in, and then I quote here, building a shared future for all life on Earth. So what I'd like to ask is, what role do you think have climate change and environmental issues played in China's foreign policy under Xi?
Well, first of all, Alice, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and I'm very grateful to be here this morning and to be having been able to attend some of the panels of China Week in the past few days virtually. I would like to start addressing this issue mainly by tackling a news that I think every single one of us have heard. And this is an assumption that as President Xi Jinping is most likely not to attend COP26, then this means that China is not really committed to climate change and environmental issues. This was something that has been resonating quite a lot in the news. And this is an assumption that to an extent is erroneous. And there are a lot of observers that has pointed out how much attendance of the Chinese leader to COP26 doesn't mean automatically that the assumption is that China is not really into the climate and environmental issues nowadays. And I'd like to contribute to this discussion by making two main points. First of all, President Xi, throughout his leadership, has developed a personal connection to the climate issues. Let's think about it on two levels. At the international level, for instance, in the last couple of years, Xi has actually made clear and shared to the international community China's commitment to climate fight. I'm thinking especially at the addresses, the last two addresses that he made at the United Nations General Assembly. Last year, he had announced that China would achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. And as Alice was reminding us, this year he has stated that the country would not build any more coal-fired power stations abroad, as part also of the Green BRI project. At the same time, at the domestic level, the government's ability to perform successfully in climate and environmental issues has proven to be fundamental in assuaging popular concerns. I think that we all remember 10 to 15 years ago when the environmental pollution in Chinese cities was quite the trigger to popular concern, at least in the field of netizens. And at the same time, I think that the UNGA remarks have reiterated for these two audiences the importance that and the personal connection that President Xi has and builds regarding climate and environmental issues. If we consider once again the domestic level, looking at more like economic stability concerns, China's economic power hubs, the most of them are located in areas that are actually vulnerable to climate change. So this is also a criticality for the economic stability concerns. I'm thinking mostly about the coastal areas. Moreover, climate awareness is beneficial to those sectors of China's new economies, for instance, green technologies, and the commitment to linking these sort of concerns at the domestic levels to at the international level might open new markets for these new economies that China is trying to build. The second point that I like to make is that historically, climate diplomacy has proven to be a way for China to build up its international reputation. There is a seminal book edited by Professor Minjian Li on Chinese soft power, and in one of these chapters, one of the authors, points out that China's international engagement with climate issues emerged in the early 1990s, when the West was politically isolating China following the Tiananmen sanctions. And what he says is that, and I quote, that climate served as an ideal tool for China to regain its international position. There is, of course, an extensive literature linking foreign policy practice to China's past strategic considerations and policy outcomes that, in a sense, may apply here. And he points to the fact that climate is actually bound to maintain some sort of diplomatic traction for China, even at internationally critical times. And I would argue even more so at internationally critical times. In a sense, the connection that I was making is that the sanctions and counter-sanctions that imposed by Beijing and several other Western countries against one another last year may create a parallel to past historical outcomes and result in the country's flexibility, in a sense, in climate and environmental negotiations for the time being. Although, of course, I'm not making a parallel of China after 1989 and China today. What I'm saying, and my major claim here, is that the historical past and successful historical outcomes in foreign policy has proven to be a source of policy for policymakers, a source of to drive policymakers in the past. And this parallel could be made here and regain the centrality of the climate and environmental issues, despite President Xi Jinping attending in person COP26 or not.
Thank you so much, Julia. And like to build on what you just mentioned as well, it has emerged that climate actions could actually represent common ground for China, the EU and the US relations. And this is particularly meaningful considering that China, the EU and the United States are responsible for about half of global CO2 emissions. And so what I'd like to ask you here is, can climate issues still be considered a common ground for the cooperation in China-Europe relations, according to you?
Thank you very much, Alice. And I'd like to build up to what I was actually, this last point that I was making. When the comprehensive agreement on investment and the sanctions later, of course, EU-China relations have slowed down. And even when the text of the agreement was released and the climate and environmental protection sections were actually open, accessible to the public, they were discussed, even though these sort of topics are actually considered a sanctuary for EU-China relations, some sort of relaxing topics and a way to foster, an easy way to foster cooperation and find a common viewpoint. Yet, even in the agreement, they were considered too narrow and, in a sense, failing to prioritize sustainable investments, which I'm sure my colleagues are going to talk extensively afterwards. Nonetheless, I do believe that climate and environment remain and will remain in the future two crucial aspects through which EU-China relations could find new impetus. And I also think that, in a sense, China, under the leadership of Xi Jinping, seems to be more attentive and be able to compromise in these two domains. And COP26, we could be actually a good occasion for a good opportunity for the EU to assess how much China is willing to concede and to what extent the country is ready to step up its commitments, which is what COP26 actually is all about. In this sense, the EU could also evaluate the opportunity based on these commitments, the opportunity of reopening the dialogue with China rooted into the climate and environmental interests common to both parties, which at the end of the day leans on the guidelines released by the European Parliament report, the new EU-China strategy that actually prioritizes climate change and cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. Brilliant. Thank you so much. And Gordon, let me come to you next. So Julia shed light on the role of climate issues in Xi's foreign policy and in China-Europe relations. And I would like to ask you, first question I'm asking you is, what is the role of China in the green transition? And why does it remain an indispensable partner in the global fight against climate change?
Thank you, Alice, and thank you all. It's a real pleasure to be here, a big honor to be in this fantastic panel and to attend the China Week event. Thank you for the question. I think it's a really critical and important question. First of all, the role of China, I would say it's a central role, being China one of the big countries in terms of emissions, and the role of China in helping to reduce emissions and have a more environmentally friendly, let's say, development has two main focuses. So the domestic part, by acting on its own emissions and reducing it, and this has been, as we mentioned before by Julia, with the aim to achieve climate carbon neutrality by 2060, and also a critical international role in what is China's main focus from now on, which is innovation. Innovation is at the center of China's new 5-year plan. And I quote, innovation is the primary driving force for development and must be placed at the heart of China's development and advanced in every field, from theory to institutions, science, technology, and culture. In this, China is at a pivotal role in the world, leading to sustainable and green technology that can help reducing the impact of climate change. Let's think, for instance, at the production of solar panels that China accounts the 70% of production on the entire world, and also LEDs. But we can also think of batteries for EV cars, which is an important shift in terms of climate neutrality. And China has moved major Chinese companies in partnership with the state, have moved from producing just the batteries to producing the cars themselves. And this means, in a way, a competition with the big automotive companies in the Western world, but also a competition that could help and push other companies and the Western world to be at the forefront of this change. But this on the international sphere of what China is doing, we can also see it in the BRI, where the importance of environment and green sustainability has been put in the treaty signed with the other countries, as well with the green BITs that China is signing with in different parts of the world. As Julia mentioned before, China's foreign policy nowadays is tackling also the importance of climate. Let's think, for instance, of the huge investment that China is making in sub-Saharan Africa, without adding the layer of sustainability. We risk of impoverishing the livelihoods of major countries that are stick to an agricultural development. And on these terms, agriculture is a key point, and China is also working in shifting its agriculture production from chemistry-based agriculture to a more tech and AI-based agriculture that can be helpful in combating climate change.
Okay, thank you so much, Gordon. That was really interesting and fascinating. And adding on this, I would like to ask you a second question. So as a young researcher and an activist as well, what is the role of younger generations in building a more sustainable society?
Thank you for this question. I think it's a really important question, and as you mentioned, as a young person, as I think I still am, sustainability is at the center of all our living. We saw in this last year with the Fridays for Future movement by Greta Thunberg. And here I also want to mention the important role of Vanessa Nakate, who is an Ugandan activist that is pushing for a more climate-friendly policy in Uganda, in sub-Saharan Africa, which is pushing for development, but doesn't have to diminish the importance of climate, since there is a huge risk of desertification, droughts, and we all depend in a way from Africa, since it has the major amount of arable lands. So most of our food production will come from there, and it becomes a really important and critical point in terms of sustainability. On my personal, let's say, endeavors towards this topic, I'm part of the Global Shapers of the World Economic Forum, and in our project of Great Reset in the post-pandemic era, sustainability and technology are beacons on which we have to develop our new normal, let's say. As part of the Global Shapers Milan Hub, we have different projects in place that put sustainability on all its aspects, from social sustainability to environmental sustainability, also to economic sustainability at the center. For instance, during the pandemic, we helped and organize a food bank by working on unconsumed food that we usually waste to be given to families that were in economic hardships due to the pandemic. And this project is continuing, and the city of Milan has won several awards for this kind of project. And food waste is another major issue in terms of sustainability. But we also work on some industries, such as the fashion industry and fast fashion, which accounts for the greater part of unsustainable practices that we see nowadays, with the project Shaping Fashion, where we organize swapping of exchange of clothes, and we try to build awareness on sustainability on the local level, and some small actions that we all can take and help all this big fight for all of us for a more sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gordon. And I come to Matthew now. But before those here in the audience, and as well as our audience online, please start thinking about your questions. And for people following the event online, please put your question in the Q&A box. So Matthew, I'd like to hear from you now. We have touched on the need for international dialogue and cooperation on climate actions. And we have then explored the role of younger generations in building a more sustainable society. And you are the founder and co-president of the Oxford University Silk Road think tank, bringing together young and brilliant minds to explore how policymakers can promote equity and sustainability as part of China's Belt and Road Initiative. And I would like to ask you, as a young expert and as an activist, how can young people be a decisive part of global conversation in foreign relations, in particularly with China and in the climate movement?
First of all, thank you very much, Alice, for inviting me here, and thank you very much to the Lao China Center for hosting this talk today, and also for the series of great seminars that we've had over the past week. In terms of how young people can then make that decisive contribution to the global conversation, the first thing I would say is it's never been a better time for young people to be able to not only engage with this conversation, but to influence the conversation more broadly. There's two areas in which Gordon and Julia here have already touched upon that I'm going to try and re-emphasize. That first of all, not only is climate change and sustainability, whether social or environmental, not become one of the most important topics in today's political conversations, and important opportunities for collaboration between China, the EU, and the US. Technology is also enabled, and with the advent of COVID, unfortunately, it's also enabled that collaboration, that dialogue to take place on a scale that never really existed before. Me and a classmate of mine founded the Silk Road Society think tank about this time last year, basically, as we were trying to make our own mark on the political conversations that were going on. But all of it wouldn't have been possible without the very simple technologies today, like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, right? When we are trying to look for partners to collaborate with people to interact with speakers to invite, all of that would have been so much more difficult if it wasn't for the fact that Zoom and Microsoft Teams existed. And as a result, we were really able to provide a real genuine platform for not only ourselves, but for lots and lots of other young people as well to engage in the conversation more deeply. In our first term, we released our first report, Planet, Profit and People, centering on the SDGs and how we can find solutions along the Belt and Road Initiative that essentially align projects, pre-existing projects more closely with the SDGs. That then allowed us to then collaborate with a variety of different partners, including the Green BRI Center at Tsinghua University, including the UN, including the China-Pakistan Center. And we were also able to cover a vast range of topics that I wouldn't have imagined possible before. For example, we were able to look at the influence of Chinese investment in the oil sector in Angola and how it's decimated the agricultural sector that you touched upon, Gordon, just now. We were able to look at that. We were also able to look in depth at what the second version of a China-Pakistan economic corridor would look like if sustainability was truly put at the core of it. And it was really a fascinating and almost magical opportunity for us. And so I would say that the key thing that young people should try and take when they're trying to influence the conversation in foreign relations and climate movement is to empower yourself and empower others, just because it's never been a better time for that. And kind of coming to the second point there, the second thing is to collaborate aggressively. And I don't mean to approach people with any aggression when you're trying to collaborate with them, but to try and collaborate with as many people and as broad a diversity of people as possible, because it's through that not only you learn the most, but also you benefit, you are able to mutually benefit those around you, as well as those working with you. Through the Silk Road Society, we were able to empower our kind of fellow analysts, not only by kind of giving them an opportunity to talk with big institutions that I mentioned before, but also to get a chance to kind of review and improve and platform their own literacy when it comes to political international relations and climate change. A lot of basically, the way in which it was set up, it was that we would establish a key theme, and then each analyst would be able to pick their own case study within this theme. So for example, looking at the China-Pakistan economic corridor, and what would it mean if sustainability was put at its core? Then it would go through several stages of review, firstly from other students like myself and my classmate who kind of give it an initial look over, then by other academics based at our university who have a more relative experience in the fields that we were trying to explore, and then by those at our partner institutions who kindly dedicated their time pro bono to help us out with improving the quality and the quantity of our work. And so this then allowed us to publish a finished product that was not only pushing for something that we believe is important when it comes to environmental and social sustainability, but also an opportunity for China, Europe, and the US to collaborate on further. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much, Matthew. And we will now start with some questions from the audience who are here in person today. And okay, I see Astrid over there.
Well, thank you everybody for a really lovely panel. Should I just be a little bit? Thank you everybody for a really lovely panel. I came in here, I think, as a person thinking of myself as a young voice driving change, and then quickly realized I'm probably an old voice whose job it now is to support others driving change. And I very selfishly would like to ask the panel's advice on how to do that in the best way as an academic in a senior position at a UK institution. What would you like to see more of from people like Carrie here and I in our positions and with the privileges that we do have? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Astrid. Maybe we can start with Julia, and then we can open it up to the rest of the panel, if that's okay.
Well, of course, and thank you very much for the question. I think that's something that I've been thinking a lot about myself, because we've been working a lot with a lot of people in my institute and my university, and we are always saying among ourselves, younger generations, what do we need? Because it's not easy to know. I think that and I can take an example. We've got some great support in organizing talks and spurring people to interact with each other. For instance, organizing lunch talks or just giving people the chance to really take advantage of the university environment, researcher environments, just to connect. I think that, as actually my colleagues, both of them were saying, the major strength that we've seen is when people come together and actually strive to interact and work together and get ideas towards how to tackle these issues and how they can do that. And I think that senior generations could have the resources to help us spur university to find some spaces for people from different departments, not just politics, Chinese studies, but also engineering, biology, to really come together and find places to start open debates. That I think would be the major thing for me.
Thank you for this question. I think it's a really key point. And for what I can say, you are already doing something. We are here. So this is already something great. I think we come with different experiences from different countries. I fly here from Italy. So different perspectives at the table. So this is already something really, really, really good and brilliant to do. I think something more that can be done is opening up this question and opportunity to those that are maybe out of academia. So the younger generations that are into the workforce or are out of our, let's say, bubble of privileges, because their voice and also their point of view since sustainability and the climate change touches everyone, such as what happened with COVID. So giving the opportunity to other voices to be heard and to contribute to this topic can be a really pivotal and game changer in what is fighting climate change and reaching sustainability.
I'd just like to build upon the 2 points that Julia here and Gordon here have already made, just by saying a little bit of engagement with young people. I've been very fortunate to be able to use the kind of the Oxford label on my society's name in order to be able to get coffee with someone or a 15-minute Zoom call with someone very easily. But not everyone is able to have that privilege. And Gordon's absolutely right in saying that if it's possible, essentially, the biggest thing that's benefited me in my experience is having those 15-minute chats with people in relative positions of seniority and expertise, and being able to bounce some ideas off of them, potentially try and get directed to meet someone else who's even more interested in the topic that they might be, but to build those networks and to build that understanding through those kind of short opportunities, because we know that you guys are also extremely busy, as everyone is. Having those short kind of interactions are super useful and also great for building confidence and training them to do the sales pitch with people senior in their field within a short 5 to 10 minutes time span.
Thank you so much to everyone in the panel for these answers. I think, and thank you, Astrid, for your question as well. I think is incredibly central. And so we will now pick up any other question from the audience here in person. Yes, please.
Hi, thanks for the sharing. My name is Nikki. I'm a student at the King's. So I have one question for Julia. You mentioned that by participating in the global fight against climate change, China gains international influence. And I wonder how does the international community receive China's effort on climate change so far? As you mentioned, it seems like China are doing a lot of things domestically, but how the international community react to that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. It actually gives me the chance to expand a bit on my argument. And I think that there are mixed feelings about what China has been doing with regards to climate change and sustainability. While the domestic efforts are actually recognized, of course, also the limitations come up quite a bit into political debates. I think that one of the most sensitive and most critical issues that have been pointed out is the fact that, especially in the framework of the Green Belt the green BRI, actually most in certain areas of the world, and I'm thinking in particular of Central Asia, which is my area of expertise, most of the investments done in energy still have been done not in green energies, but in traditional forms of energy. And that was, of course, something that actually went against what all the Green Belt and Road Initiative it is. But I also think that this point made by President Xi Jinping, if put into practice, of being more careful about what China does abroad within this sort of frameworks, not exclusively to the BRI, but in general, also thinking bilaterally, has actually made a difference. And I think it was quite important that he did that right before COP26, because it really opens up a little bit more on dialogue and to striving cooperation. What I meant with my second point was, yes, what China is doing with regard internationally on climate and the environment, yes, it's also a form of diplomacy and soft power. I mentioned the entire book about soft power, so we're talking about attraction and all those things, but it's also a way to regain reputation, which is something that all states are driving for, striving to obtain, and I think it's fairly critical for China at this point, given all the pandemic and all the sanctions issue that, especially with its Western power. And that's why I did think that a commitment towards opening up and towards being more careful towards what's actually happening abroad and what Chinese green investments are doing, and focusing more on the green and less on the investment, in a sense, could really push towards better cooperation and reopening dialogue. Of course, if all of this is actually put into practice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you for your question as well. So we'll now take another question from the audience here, if anyone has questions. No. Oh, Astrid has another question, okay?
I'm hoping with another shameless ask for the help of these younger voices that we have in the room, and taking this opportunity to listen to you now that we're in a room together. This China Week will be happening again next year. What are the really important things that we should be talking about at that point?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Astrid. And maybe we can start from Matthew this time, and then do Gordon and Julia can build up. If that's okay for you.
Of course. I think climate has been the key, climate and the environment has been the key theme this year. And I think naturally, when we're looking at sustainability more broadly, or if we're going to stay within the realm of sustainability, the natural second conversation is social sustainability. We're seeing now that in China, they're implementing a lot of policies in order to try and curb the multi-billionaires of society, to put it lightly, and to try and create at least a notional sense of balance within that society. I think following that, and given that we'll have at least a year to then reflect upon it next year, the social sustainability side of it is something that not only I would be very interested to come and listen to talks about, but also I think would be really important for the China Center to look at too.
Thank you so much. And then Gordon, would you like to add on that?
Okay, yes. Since Matthew have already mentioned social sustainability, which is my real passion, I will go maybe with technology. Since technology is helping in combating climate change, and China is playing a key role in technological advancement in terms of green investments and of course sustainability. So maybe having a panel with experts on what is happening on this side, which also involves what is let's say the competition between EU and US and China in terms of the leading role in technological advancement, will maybe add something more to a very rich set of panels on the China Week.
So I guess it's me now. No, I think that Of course, you've actually, both of you touched upon most of the topics that I was also thinking about, although I think that it would be interesting to have a discussion specifically on the SDGs and how China is actually contributing to the SDGs, what's been done so far, because China has been very, very good in achieving some of these targets and not in others. So it would be nice to compare what China has been doing good and what China has been doing bad in this sense. And I also think that maybe for a following year, I don't know, there are a lot of transnational issues that are actually challenging all of us, and China's being one of the major international players has a major voice in this. And I was thinking about, of course, tech, but also the digital realm. Our lives with the pandemic, we've seen it all, have been digitalizing so fast and in so many different ways. It would be quite great to have a discussion on how a player like China is actually working on this in the digital realm and how that is affecting us, which sort of spheres of cooperations do we have in that sense?
Thank you so much. And now, if that's okay, I'd have a question for Gordon. So as a global shaper in Milan, I'd like to ask you how the UN Youth Summit has been integrated to COP26.
Okay. This is a tough question here. So for what I had the opportunity to witness in Milan, like for going back to the question you asked previously about youth engagement, having the pre-COP summit, the youth pre-COP summit in Milan was in a way challenging, being the first major event in the post-pandemic era, but coupling it with what is happening tomorrow in Italy, in Rome, with the G20 event, put a big highlight on Italy, and also gave the opportunity to younger people there and abroad to connect and really reflect on what is sustainability, but even more empowered and in a more central position, being this first summit, the first meetings in the post-pandemic era, in which we have to rethink our new normal, as I said before, and having the opportunity to have the voice of the youth heard at the very beginning and give some inputs that I hope they will be discussed in Glasgow in the coming week, and building up on what Greta Thunberg said, I hope it will not be a blah blah blah, but they will put real and significant policy changes that can impact and change our life positively in the coming future.
Okay, thank you so much. And do we have space for like another question in person? If that's is there anyone who has questions?
Actually, do nobody from the audience for the panelists? I do have a question if there is.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask my colleagues, since you're both very involved as activists other than researchers and analysts, I was wondering whether you could share with us some, what's the big difficulties that you find in youth engagement, especially in making people that belong to different realities, different continents, and coming together? I was just your thoughts on that, because I think it's one of the criticalities. We have a lot of very active groups scattered throughout the world. So how could you make them together?
Who's first?
Whoever.
Happy to go first.
Yes, sure.
I would say that there's no real kind of one easy solution. I think it's got to be patchwork, and you've just got to start somewhere and build it up from there, basically. In my experience, in terms of trying to connect with people from all around the world and from different cultures and backgrounds, you have to go into it with as open a mind as possible, and also to be as generous as possible, and to give the benefit of the doubt to everyone you meet, basically. And that way you can build some trust. And then once the trust becomes a little bit more rigid and a little bit more robust, you have the chance to actually properly kind of debate people on subjects that you might not agree naturally on. But it's only through building that trust first that those networks can then be built out and thrive properly.
Okay. From my point of view, we can say that the pandemic helped and accelerated some processes. As you said, we had different associations, NGOs, youth groups scattered from my side in Italy that were maybe working on similar projects, but had no opportunity to reach the policymakers, and actually put their arguments on the table. With the pandemic, and as mentioned by Matthew before, by going online, we had this virtual agora where everyone just having a connection and a device could make the voice heard. And this was really, really helpful. If I can add a small example, I've been trying to create a project which falls in the realm of social sustainability, which is helping young students. In Italy, we have this huge problem of youth unemployment, and this is even worse for people from foreign origins. They have difficulties in knowing, let's say, the working system, moving from university to the workforce. And this project, I've been discussing it with friends and studying this for 6 years. But they were all, trying to pursue their career all over the world. I've been traveling a lot. With the pandemic, we were able to put this project to the table, use Zoom, as I was located in Germany, one in the US, and others scattered in Italy, and actually implement the project. And now we have trained and connected more than 100 youths with multinational companies and professionals. So as mentioned before, technology is actually boosting and making a lot of voice that were trying, to come out in different angles of the world heard, and connecting them together to have higher leverage power to make real change.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And do we have some questions online from our online audience? So maybe Hannah can read that out, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you. We've got an anonymous question on the Q&A box asking about what happens after COP26 in terms of the youth climate activist community. The next 2 weeks are crucial in everything that we've been building up to, and you've mentioned that pre-COP youth summit. But what's the activist community going to do to continue that conversation forward? Are there any key initiatives to make sure we don't lose that momentum?
Thank you very much, Hannah. Maybe we can start with Julia and then pass it to Gordon and Matthew, if that's okay.
Well, actually, as you two are the activists, I will give you the floor.
Okay. For sure, it will not stop at COP26. And since COP, we will in the future have other COPs until we all hope we will no more need to fight climate change. I think there has been in the recent years a big change in this activism towards a more sustainable world. I see it from the small actions of all all the youth, but also from our parents as well, like from simply how we treat our waste. I usually, when I go back home, I try to yell at my parents to properly separate their waste. So there is a lot of momentum, and a lot is being built up on this, and I think the results coming from this COP26, which we are all very much looking forward to see real actions, will decide how and in which ways this activism will move forward.
Building upon Gordon's really important and vital point there, I would say that holding the various governments of the world to account with not only their commitments that they make at COP this year, but also their existing commitments that they haven't met yet. In 2009, and as I'm sure all of you will know, at the Copenhagen Accords, developed countries committed to $100 billion of funding for developing nations every single year. And there's not been a single year where they have met that goal in the last decade. Hopefully, this goal will not only be increased, but actually realized. And I think that's something that's particularly important to me, as I'm working on a report basically about the need for developed countries to also engage with countries that are politically isolated. The Irans, the North Koreas, the Eritreas of the world in particular, because for most of this conversation, they've been left out. But it's more important, almost on a very basic survival level, for all the countries of the world to engage with each other on issue as potent and important as climate change together, and quickly as such. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so if there is a last question, we have like a couple of minutes for that. If there is anyone with any last question, otherwise that's okay. It's good time to wrap up, I feel. So thank you so much to our fantastic speakers today, and to our audience joining us both in person and remotely. I would also like to thank our partners for this event, the Italian Institute for International Political Studies, ISPI, and Oxford University Silk Road think tank. It's been a really fascinating discussion, and a really timely discussion as well. And it's been a real pleasure to talk with you all today. So China Week's program for today is not finished. We are hosting our closing reception and anniversary celebration this evening at 5:30 p.m. At Bush House. And please check our online or physical program for details. And many thanks again to everyone, and have a lovely day. Thank you.